Gentleman from Maryland for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hur, your report starts with the line, "We conclude that no criminal charges are warranted in this matter." Have you had any reason to change your opinion about that?
No, Congress. No, Ranking Member.
You highlight the independence and support you got from the Attorney General and DOJ. Have you changed your mind about that?
I have not.
The report describes President Biden's cooperation in your requests. He allowed his homes to be searched. He answered questions for hours in the midst of a global crisis. Have you had any reason to change your mind about that?
No, Ranking Member.
All right. You also repeatedly contrast Biden's cooperation with the conduct of Donald Trump. You say, quote, "Most notably, after being given multiple chances to return classified documents and avoid prosecution, Mr. Trump allegedly did the opposite. According to the indictment, he not only refused to return the documents for many months, but he also obstructed justice by enlisting others to destroy evidence and then to lie about it." Have you any reason to change your judgment about the differences between President Biden's cooperation and the former president's non-cooperation?
No, I continue to stand by those words in my report.
With such a striking contrast, our colleagues have switched over from being impeachment investigators for constitutional high crimes and misdemeanors, which is how this whole thing started, to being amateur memory specialists, giving us their drive-by diagnoses of the President of the United States, whose soaring oratory, powerful historical analysis, and devastating extemporaneous repartee with even the most skilled ninja hecklers of the Freedom Caucus were on full display at the State of the Union address last week for the whole country to see. The desperate quest to invent an issue is a distraction from the 91 federal and state federal charges that Donald Trump faces now, his staggering civil court losses in New York now totaling more than $500 million, and his full-blown embrace and romance with authoritarian dictators and communist tyrants all over the world, from Viktor Orban in Hungary to Vladimir Putin in Russia, the former head of the KGB, to the communist dictator of North Korea. It's not, my friends, this is a memory test. But it's not a memory test for President Biden. It's a memory test for all of America. Do we remember fascism? Do we remember Nazism? Do we remember communism and totalitarianism? Have we completely forgotten the sacrifices of our parents and grandparents and prior generations? While we play pin the tail on the donkey in this wild goose chase, all of these silly games, Donald Trump entertains authoritarian hustler Viktor Orban at Mar-a-Lago for the weekend, and Orban comes out to declare that if we indeed sleepwalk into another Trump presidency, Trump will, quote, not give a single penny to Ukraine. That's what all of this is about. It's about trying to pull the wool over the eyes of America, because the tyrants and dictators of the world are on the march today. So who wins with this ludicrous, embarrassing spectacle? Orban wins, Putin wins, Xi wins, the tyrants of the world win. They have one more reason to celebrate Donald Trump and his cult followers, who've completely lost their way. They're looking for high crimes and misdemeanors. Now they appoint themselves amateur memory specialists, and that's what they pounce on the President of the United States about. America faces a choice between democracy and tyranny. And the president laid it out at Valley Forge, and he laid it out in the State of the Union. Will America stand on the side of people struggling against fascist aggression? Will we stand with the people of Ukraine against Vladimir Putin, whose filthy war has meant the kidnapping of thousands of Ukrainian children, the murder, the slaughter of thousands of Ukrainian civilians, and the attack on an independent sovereign democracy? But we're not working on that today. We're not standing up for democracy and human rights and international law around the world. No, we're trying to play memory detectives, to parse the language of a president who the whole world got to see at the State of the Union address directly address the real questions of our time. And it is democracy versus dictatorship. And all of the autocrats and the theocrats, all of the kleptocrats of the world are together in league against American democracy, and we have to stand up for American democracy against these stupid games. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. The chairman of the Oversight Committee, Mr. Comer's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I speak in support of the amendment. But first I want to talk about both what this committee and what this Congress is doing to the rule of law. Earlier this week, we witnessed the spectacle of the highest-ranking Republican in the country, the Speaker of the House, someone in line for the presidency, standing outside a Manhattan courthouse in a hush money payment to a porn star trial, vouching for the good moral character of the defendant. Now, I would imagine if you asked a younger Mike Johnson some 10 or 15 years ago, could you ever imagine you would stand outside of a courthouse in a hush money payment to a porn star trial and vouch for the moral character of the defendant? He would never imagine that possible. But like the proverbial frog in the boiling pot, what we have seen, not just with the Speaker, but with so many of the Republican leadership over the last several years, is one surrender of moral authority after another surrender, one betrayal of what one once stood for, followed by another betrayal, followed by another, until you find yourself standing outside of a Manhattan courthouse, vouching for the moral authority and character of someone who possesses none. And not just losing yourself and losing any sense of right and wrong in the process, but here denigrating the very institution of justice, making the false claims, the patently false claims that this trial in Manhattan was somehow about keeping Donald Trump off the campaign trail, something the Speaker knows is patently false, but willing to repeat. And this is where we are, where our highest-ranking official, Republican official, is essentially telling the American people, don't trust our system of justice. Don't trust the rule of law. And here in this committee, we see something very similar. We see a Republican U.S. attorney brought on to investigate the president. We see him make a report to this Congress that there is nothing prosecutable in what he was able to find. We see him at the same time failing to make a prosecutable case, deciding the next best thing he can do is lob a political grenade in his report and politically belittle the president. And we see this committee unable, after months and months and millions of dollars to make any kind of an impeachable case, decide to follow Mr. Hur's tainted example. We can't make a case for any impeachment. There is no high crime. There is no misdemeanor even. And so we will do the next best thing, and we will use this to political advantage by subpoenaing tapes of an interview we already have the transcript for. And why? Because the Republicans in this committee have moved from being the criminal defense firm for the president to being essentially an adjunct of the president's media advertising firm. They want the video for Donald Trump's campaign commercials. That's where this committee has become, the Committee on the Judiciary, the committee that is centered or supposed to be centered on the rule of law and on justice. And what are we doing? We're holding the Attorney General of the United States in contempt. And for what? Because he won't give video material for a campaign commercial to this committee on behalf of a president who is a criminal defendant in a hush money payment to a porn star case in New York, the first of many criminal trials that he will face. This is where we are. This is where we are. I first joined this committee, now it's been over 20 years ago. And I suppose like a young Mike Johnson, I could have never imagined this committee would engage in such a thing. It's not as if 20 years ago this committee was some bastion of bipartisan comity. It wasn't. We might and did disagree on abortion and on guns and on the whole host of other policy issues. But I don't think any Democrat or Republican on this committee would have ever imagined it would be brought so low as to hold an attorney general in contempt because it can't get a video for a campaign commercial when it was already given the transcript. But this is where we are. And I think just day after day, moment after moment, year after year, we lose sight of how far we have fallen and any sense of what we are supposed to be about in this committee. And I don't imagine anything I have to say is going to change that, but I do think every now and then the country needs to be reminded that there is nothing okay about this, there's nothing right about this, there's nothing normal about this. We need to get back to demonstrating some devotion to our constituents and the rule of law. And with that, I yield back.